toward the One, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of Guidance. Welcome to this fourth in the series of 6 classes on birthing your resurrection body. So at this point, you might be wondering, well, why birth your resurrection body? What good's it going to do me in my day-to-day life? Is there a reason to want to try to do this? And so I'd like to take a look at a contrast between Buddhism and Sufism. In Buddhism, there's the Four Noble Truths, and one of the Four Noble Truths is desire creates suffering, and that there is a way to overcome suffering. In Sufism, desire is looked at in a very different way. And the difference is it's not the kind of desire Buddhism is talking about is cravings for things, and you're suffering because you don't have what you're looking for. You're lacking something and you want to get it, and then as soon as you get that, there's always something else that you want to get. There's no end to those desires. Sufism talks about creation began with a desire of the divine being, a desire for God to know and to love and to be known and to be loved. And Hazrat Khan says that every desire begins with a divine impulse. And so each of us, we could think, is like emergent fulfillment of a blueprint that was established at the time of the creation of our soul. But the blueprint wasn't something fixed. It wasn't like you have a blueprint for a house and it's going to be constructed exactly like the blueprint. The blueprint is like a starting intention that's launched, and it's unknown how that's going to turn out because it's transmuted, it's transformed by our experiences in life, the way that each of us is a unique expression of the divine being. And so in seeking to fulfill our divine purpose, in seeking to really recover that original divine impulse, but then further it through our participation in our relationship with the divine and with every unique expression of the divine that we encounter in existence. And that type of desire, it's very different. It does not create suffering. The path towards fulfilling that desire creates joy and fulfillment both for ourselves and for the divine being. Then what about this suffering? You know, shouldn't spirituality get us to a place where there's just no discomfort? It's just love and light and bliss and peace. Well, you can't have an existence that's like that. And some of you have heard me recount a story of some computer programmers that would simulate life by setting some initial rules in a computer program, and then the program would evolve itself, and they didn't know how it was going to turn out. Well, lo and behold, they found that as the program evolved, it created like a miniature of the world, and it had the computer equivalents of war and famine and viruses and things like that. And so the programmers thought, well, you know, the world's messed up enough. Why don't we just create a computer utopia? And why don't we tinker with the rules so that none of these bad things can happen? And when they did that, they let the system evolve over time. And in every case, after a period of time, the whole thing just died out. And so it's inherent in the nature of existence that there's always going to be things that are difficult and challenging. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't work on improving conditions, but that without those, it wouldn't be possible for life itself to exist. So in Sufism, it's not really about trying to get to a place where there's not any suffering. Suffering has a lot to do with how we respond to external conditions. And the Sufi aims to find beauty, to harmonize with difficulties, and to find a way of relating to things that it opens up a whole world of possibilities rather than causing us to shut down. So the ultimate aim of that is trying to awaken to what we call our resurrection body, which is the fullness of our being, but very much existing in the world, very much grounded in the world.
Well, I can take it from that idea of the resurrection body to think about what I think about is a very paradoxical holy situation that we are in. And that being that we are, through our spiritual development so far and what we have learned, and some of us going through the Christian tradition also, and I want to say too that there's way more than we have unrolled here about the Zoroastrian tradition. And that speaks also of this topic, which is the many realms that we really exist in. The small amount of that we are aware of, and then the heavens upon heavens upon heavens that rise above that we have forgotten about. And so let me continue here. Just as we cherish our first responders in the pandemic as they risk all to our care, we are on the front lines in the experience of living and dying. So this little thin slice that I'm talking about that we're aware of is really the front line of existence. It is the part that Azarbash was speaking about, the emotions and the ups and downs, and it's definitely a place of incredible challenge. And we'd said last time that we do have our celestial twin in the heavens that resounds with us in all that we go through in our lives. But this experience of the limited is something that is almost like an inoculation that the divine being through us goes through. And in all that we discover in that process of becoming human, this essence of our being and of all of the creation is created and is cycled back up again and through the situation. When the Zoroastrians united with these other higher realms, the way they did that was that they'd have litany to the different archangels and angels and cosmic beings. And in the prayers, they just imagined through their beautiful, true imagination, staircases and prayers. Let's say the incense floating up to the heavens would be the path through which they would welcome the divine beings. And in our Christian religion, we speak about the Heavenly Father, and we speak about Christ, and Christ thinking, of course, that his Heavenly Father and he were one. So here's the beginning of this idea of this holy situation that is a paradox. We discover that there's a vast universe, but somehow our task is to feel intimate with this vast universe. And it just seems like something that like a Zen koan to us, that how can we imagine, how can we reach out to this incredibly huge universe and even love and feel that universe? It's just having our presence, it seems it's so diluted and diluted in reaching out to all these places. However, it's to here we go with our true imagination, finding a way to be able to feel this intimacy, to, like we were saying last time, that you are the son, you are the daughter of the Earth Mother. Really very much like Jesus saying that he and the Father are one. And in realizing that relationship, then we activate something within us that is a passion, that is an incredible organ of the soul, they say. It is the imagination, but it is something so much more than that. It is a holy process, HOLY, through which we assert and stand for that relationship. And we begin without really knowing what we're speaking about. We say, well, I am, but this is something I'm told. I was a Catholic growing up, and I was told these things. But then I must admit, they became a reality as I would pray. And I would feel the divine, as many of you do, in the world around me, in nature. And there'd be these reminders. And it would be reminders in terms that I could understand. If I liked birds, then birds would come to me. You know, and if I were creating something in art, then my art would speak to me. So there's different ways that we could be spoken to, but it is a mighty work that we have to do, and opening that imagination to being able to conceive of the vastness of all of it, and that somehow we have this incredible purpose. There's a meaningfulness in it for all of us, and not just all of us as a group. Each one of you is bringing something that no one else could ever do. But it doesn't get through to the whole until we work on that ability to imagine where this is going, to imagine who are we speaking to imagine what realms are really resonating to what it is that we're saying. And some of the ways of that, we have a couple of thought experiments for you tonight. Pardon? You been ready? Okay. So, for example, Einstein had thought experiments that he had you go on a train, and he visualized different things in order to understand concepts that were very difficult to understand. But you'd like to add something at this point?
Well, what we're talking about is arriving at a radically different state of, you could say, consciousness, but we usually think of consciousness like what we're thinking about. That's our consciousness, or the nature of what we're experiencing. And we talk about our higher consciousness. I had a peak experience. But the radical shift is the going from whatever it is that we're perceiving or experiencing and feeling that we're over here and we're experiencing it. It could be either externally, or we think of it, well, it's something inside of ourselves, but there's still kind of this fixed notion of ourself that's having this experience. And we can try to describe what we're aiming at, but at some point, something just gets triggered in us, and we really get what it means to have this experience of the deepest sense of interconnectedness with the totality, with everything that we're experiencing. And that starts off just, we could say, horizontally in a particular realm of experience, which the Sufis would call the cosmic dimension. It's like what you can think of as in existence, but also in the transcendental dimension. And we start by thinking, well, we have this state of consciousness, and here's a higher state or higher realm of our being, and we do something, we come up here and we come back here, and kind of like a ping pong ball. But at some point, it gels, and we discover and realize that that is all part of the totality of who we are. So it's a way both of understanding and being that now becomes much vaster than our normal way of experiencing.
So here's a thought experiment for you. It's actually from the Spiritual Body, Celestial Earth book by Corbin. This idea of what we spoke of before as Tawil, which is a process by which we, it's called harmonic perception, is one way of defining it. And it's a way for us to see beyond what we see as through our senses. We see and perceive what's deeper, we might say. So if we think about an organ in the church, it has certain stops, they call it, that cause several pipes of different lengths to speak simultaneously. In other words, make their sound simultaneously. So you have overtones. This brings out at the top note, when you come to the top note, it brings out the fundamental note again. And a number of harmonic overtones can be heard, more and more overtones, and at a certain pitch sound simultaneously. So this is similar to the process that we call harmonic perception. So it wouldn't work unless there were many different levels of existence. But if we see it all as this great pipe organ, and each realm being able to resonate or perceive our resonance, then also make that tone that we're making until finally all of them are linked by the Tawil, by the sound. You probably made overtones yourselves, and you hear that sound, and then you hear it higher and higher, almost like you could think of as heavenly answers to what your tone is. And on this, of course, now we would have to go beyond the idea of actual sound to vibration, and being able to perceive the resonance from our own, you could say, our presence, the vibration, as it is, as we are able to reach outwards in a way. Imagine that the beings really can hear and respond, and especially in our own interactions and with the world, as we notice around us answers, messages, and so on, being able to open those out to higher and higher realms. So it's one way of thinking about our multiple dimensions and being able to be in contact with them through Tawil.
So as Giovanni Ra was talking, I was thinking about the idea of translation. So I was thinking about just our physical universe and astronomers. So a lot of them just use optical telescopes and can magnify visible light coming in, but some of them use radio telescopes, X-ray telescopes, infrared telescopes, and so on. But all of those frequencies of the electromagnetic spectrum are present all the time. But in order to make sense out of them, they have to be translated in a way that we can understand them. So if you've seen pictures of infrared astronomy, it shows what the universe would look like if we could see infrared light, which we can't, but it shows that. If you've seen pictures of what flowers look like to bees and other creatures, that we can't see that ultraviolet light, but we can translate it in a way that we can perceive. And so when we have experiences, particularly inner experiences of subtle realms, and we've been talking and we'll continue to talk about the multiple levels on which all of us exist, the multidimensionality of our being, in order to be able to relate to the quality of, let's say, the light on a higher realm, there has to be some kind of translation that makes it perceptible to the realm that we're accustomed to. And so sometimes the way that translation takes place in mystical experiences, and I'm sure many of you have had these, is incredible visions of just maybe of beautiful landscapes, or music that sounds like the music of angels, or a feeling of a taste or a kind of an energy that's so much richer than what's present in ordinary life. Well, somehow that we've become capable, we've engaged in what Ravani was talking about, that harmonic perception, in a way that now we can be in relationship to that way of experiencing a deeper aspect of the way that our being actually is. And there's no end to these, she was talking about the stops and the organs. There's no end to the stops and the higher stops and so on. There's always more, just like physicists are continually discovering things that just totally blow away their previous notions of what the universe was like, dark energy, dark matter, and so on. So all of this translation of, you could say, of subtle energy and experiences is the living story of existence. We could say it's the allegory of our own soul, the way that we navigate that journey and the experiences we have, but it's also the allegory of the divine being experiencing itself and awakening to itself. So just one more comment here. I know some biologists have taken like the structure of DNA and assigned different notes to the different amino acids that make it up. And so you can actually play music that is related to the pattern of the DNA. And they're using this actually to diagnose disease, because there are some sounds that come out in DNA that are associated with different disorders, where things are not the way that they're supposed to be. They're not harmonious anymore. So it's like Hazrat Khan said that there's only one scripture, divine scripture, and the pages are the leaves of the trees. Well, the pages are the vibrations of everything in existence and the way that they're singing their song. And if we can find a way of relating to them through ta'wil, then we're able to partake of that song, and furthermore we can contribute to it.
And some of us might do that through sound, and others through color, right? And others through just the feeling of our hearts, and just our own individual ways. Also, when you're speaking about the sounds with disease, sometimes dogs can perceive people being ill. It could be with their excellent hearing. That's something that they're really good at. Okay, so if you remember, we had the exercise actually a couple times, I believe, with feeding the angel, that we were giving our presence to our celestial self that is on the other side of life, that one that holds us in great love and perceives all that we on the front lines are going through. And sometimes we have a glimpse of what that is, but even if we don't, if we can feel that we are giving everything, all the experiences of our life, whether we have been able to understand them, whether they really are, we're struggling to understand them, or whether there's really an elixir that we can give as being worked all the way through and come to a beautiful conclusion through an experience. That we can feel that we are really giving, you could think of it as all the points on our physical being are opened up and given to the other side. And there's something interesting to do with science that also does this kind of translation that I wanted you to mention again.
Yeah, well, I remember from some math courses I had in college, you can have one mathematical function that ends up being mapped onto a different mathematical function, and there's a correspondence. Let's say there may be a one-to-one correspondence between the points on this one and the points on that one, but the structures can look dramatically different. But the interesting part was there's an aspect of each of those functions is called the kernel, Kernel. And it's kind of like the essential property of that function that remains unchanged throughout those different mappings. So I was thinking that we could say that our soul, in its experiences in physical life and the experiences before this existence and the experiences after we leave this physical realm, something has been mapped from one state of being on to another. And it's not like a carry over every single experience in just the way that it was, but there's that essence that continues. And so we could imagine, Ravani was talking about thought experiments, kind of laying out a map of our existence through time, different directions, past and future, and finding that essence that was there throughout all of those experiences, and yet the incredible variety that each of those experiences brought to our soul. And then if we get enough perspective on the whole thing, it would be like, if you were looking, I'm looking at our carpet in our living room, which some of you have seen many times. But if I showed you a bit of this under the microscope, you'd have no idea what the whole thing looked like. But if you zoomed out, you go, oh, wow, look at this. You know, I see sections here and sections there. So we can think of our whole existence, of our soul's experience, like this infinite tapestry that's always being woven and changed. And it's like whenever we make a change in this part over here, it changes all the other parts simultaneously, and not just flat out across time dimensions, but in the transcendent dimensions, which is atemporal, it's beyond time, and we have trouble coming up with an image for that, but we can just sort of, if you remember Stranger in a Strange Land, we can grok it. This is all me. I'm all of this. I'm the part that's laid out in this tapestry through existence in this life and before and after, but I'm also this multi-dimensional tapestry that is coextensive with everything in existence and is not only affected by everything, but is having its own effect on everything in existence. So we can become, Pirbalaya talks about becoming capable of participating in the divine programming. So maybe we can take that up a notch or two, and we become capable of participating in the divine artistic creation that's unfolding all the time. And each of us brings a different slant to that sheds a light upon it, that triggers off realizations in other parts of this tapestry.
It's beautiful. And bringing it back to the angel exercise, if it seems that, you know, it's a stretch to do that, and maybe we want help with that, then again, we can give that to the angel. We can, as we were saying, translate what seems to be going on in 3 dimensions and sending it all up to this angel. And I have done things like this, and I recommend it in a meditation, that we are saying, you know, I know you're the other part of me, my twin celestial angel self, and here, anything that this can help with, I'm very happy to release and bless you with. And if there are ways that you can help me understand, then please help me with that. And open ourselves up to that possibility. And I think you'll be surprised. So that was some about the multidimensional aspect that we spoke about, as we are the sons and daughters of Sventa Almighty, and that we are saying, yes, I will allow the house of Sventa Almighty to open within me. And this house is a multidimensional house. So we're welcoming that possibility. And much more can happen in our realization when we are able to know more about that multidimensionality. The other thing that we said that we were wanting to exemplify are the modes of being of Sventa Almighty. We spoke about this last time, that holy action and the protection of the world and the compassion on the world were part of it. But I also wanted to include in our second aspect of Sventa Almighty, all the wazifas, all the modes of being of the Earth Mother are things that, as we develop them in our own being, in our own spiritual practice, there's no keeping these from affecting this entire manifestation, and and even ripples through all the manifestations that there are. So this is also something that you will do these practices, and there'll be an improvement in your own spiritual development. But depending upon who you think you are, who you know you are, the magnitude of this change is much, much more logarithmically more. Whatever is bigger than logarithmically more.
Well, if I can step in for a minute here, I remember in one of William Tiller's books, he talks about whenever you have a system of things in resonance with each other, they could be tuning forks, 100 tuning forks that are in resonance, and you add one more to it, you think, well, that's going to make a contribution. Now there's going to be 1/100th more of the vibration, but actually he showed in a pretty easy to understand little proof, the additional contribution is the same as 2 times however many things are in that system acting separately. So one more added to 100 in resonance has the same effect as 200 operating in isolation. So look at what's happening, starting to happen in the world now with I mean, it's a global shift in consciousness, and the pandemic has certainly been a trigger for part of it, but all the people aware of how racism has been prevalent throughout the centuries, but it's like something has clicked, and it's like a wave that's spreading through. There's a you could say there's a mass shift in consciousness taking place, and when people are able to align in the spirit of what the Sufis aim for, in harmony with, not polarized with, not this versus that, but it's like having a vision of the way that we would like this world to be, and trusting that it's possible to move towards that. And yes, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to realize that achievement. But like Ravani Ra is saying, then when we work with our practices like that, the effect of that is hugely more than if we think we're just doing this thing, sitting by ourselves in isolation and meditation, repeating a wazifa so many times. One way we can jump onto the bandwagon, so to speak, is to think about these practices have been done by thousands and thousands of beings over the centuries. And so the collective energy of that, we can tap into when we're doing that. And oftentimes when we think about the transmission, like of a particular spiritual lineage, we think, well, it's just about what's been before us, and we'd like to be able to awaken to that. But I think it's essential for us to realize we're a part of the furtherance of that transmission by what we add with the light of our being, expanding our sense of ourself far beyond our separated notion of who that we think we are. And I mean, as Ravani Ra was saying, the change that can take place when people start having this realization, which doesn't necessarily have to take place through doing what we think of as spiritual practices. It can be about how you relate to activities in the world, how you relate to people, how you relate to nature. It can bring about an opening, a new scope of what can take place that can bring about solutions to problems that otherwise seem very intractable.
So knowing who you are in doing what you're doing is key. And so let's go on to the third aspect of our relationship with the Sventa Almighty, and that was the holy thought, the thought of wisdom, to hold that thought of wisdom. I think we've already been talking some about the thought of wisdom. We've gone over into this next aspect, But part of that also is that this whole process that we are looking at, geosophy is what we've called it, is really an increase of reflectiveness or resonance and of that light of glory that we spoke about a little bit, Svarna, Xvarnah, the light from which all beings have been made. This is what we are all made of. We have this lovely covering over that right now, but that's not going to be there for so long. That just kind of helps us to understand some things, to have this opacity, they call it in this tradition. But what really happens is beyond that opacity much of the time, and the progression that we'll see in formation of that resurrection body is an increase of illumination, or you could say, I love this part, incandescence. That you could say the energy of your own soul, the energy of your passion, raises things to an incandescence, so that they say, so that the angels within them speak or show themselves. Another way of thinking about that is that all of the qualities that are in them are speaking, or you could say all the dimensions that are there are now speaking, they're showing themselves. So this translucency that's happening in this incandescence of this incredible vision, and look over my head right now, we have this sun blazing out the message, is really the foretaste, they say, of your own resurrection, of the moment of your own resurrection. That somehow, like in eschatology, where they see the arisen Christ, but now you see things of the future, but the time is irrelevant at that point. In the glow of all of this transformation, there is no time. So this kind of moment that we come into again and again in Pir Zia's taking us through the marriages that he called them. In this tradition, it's more like that you'll be coming face to face with a being of one of these realms, and you'll look at them and you'll say, oh, you're so beautiful, and I love you, and I feel this great energy. And somehow then all of a sudden there's this recognition, oh my gosh, I are the same being. We are really one. And then this is one of the great changes, initiations, I would say, in your meditation. And you've all gone through things like that. When you've seen something magnificent and you've realized the beauty of it and the strength of it and everything, and then all of a sudden realizing, oh, there's no difference between you and me. We are one. We have our own uniqueness. But that is just that incredible beauty that can be as all the parts of the divine. So this process continues, and how does it continue? In your imagination. This kind of imagination is really recalling the truth of what everything is. That's what the true imagination is. It's not cooking up something just for fun. It is a great seriousness and dignity and alignment with truth that this kind of imagination is, in unveiling the things in their real sense. You want to add something?
Yeah. So a term I often use is docking. So like when we launch a ship to the International Space Station, it's got to very carefully dock with it so it doesn't crash into it or miss it altogether and end up going out into the further reaches of the galaxy. And so when we're having profound inner experiences, when we're beginning to awaken to a deeper, subtler aspect of our own being, at first, it's kind of like we throw out, like a fisherman, throw out the line and get a little nibble. Well, yeah, this seems like something's here. I'm not quite sure what it's about. But then we allow ourselves to be in a state, psychologists call passive volition. It's like receptive and open, and there's an intention, but there's not a pushing of anything. And a lot of times when we do that, then an image will start to gel in our mind, and we might have started with an image to get the experience going, or maybe an image comes to us. But when this docking takes place and the faculty of imagination really is activated, then it opens up a whole world of experience that is no longer being driven by a sense of being separate, trying to make an experience happen, or preconceiving what we think the experience is about. And I'll bet all of us have had experiences like this in meditation, where something comes to you and afterwards you go, well, I could have never cooked that up. I could have never figured that out just sitting here on my own. It's something surprising. I call them divine downloads. I mean, just it's like condensed wisdom is given to you, and it begins to germinate and sprout and flower in your being. And so we practice this faculty of this docking and connecting and opening. And initially the experiences are what are called HAL, H-A-L, transitory experiences, peak experiences, but then we come back to here and we think, oh, that's really wonderful. I'd like to get back to there, but we have this sense it's separated from us. But gradually there's like a lattice that sort of gets established, or a scaffolding between our normal state of experience and this state. But then eventually when you're building a building, you have the scaffolding at first to construct it, but once the building's there, you don't need the scaffolding, and the scaffolding is no longer needed. And now there's a perception and an experience of ourselves that incorporates both of these aspects in this relationship Ravani Ra is talking about. This is my true self. I've awakened to an aspect, and when I pull back, it's incredibly beautiful. I see my personal angel, or even Arby called my personal Lord here. But then we come closer and closer, and then it just, there's a feeling of unity. But then there's always the pulling back from it. And why? Because that enables even more to emerge from that. That creative process requires that coming together, of bursting forth of something, and then kind of a regrouping to reorient ourselves in this much richer state of what our being is all about. So that's a process that goes on, I think, forever.
Mm-hmm. And also when it is, speaking of that resonance that you brought up before, and as we know, when sometimes there's a change even in a let's say the monkeys learn how to wash, what was that name?
Oh, sweet potatoes.
Sweet potatoes.
The 100th monkey.
Yeah, and so all of a sudden it happens not only on that island, but in all the different islands, and they had no communication, but somehow there's a change, so that when you actualize one of these experiences, or change into a higher initiation of soul, then it does communicate with all of the rest of us. This is what's happened in all of you that are right here, right now. We have had something that has been communicated already through the order, perhaps, but also through subtle ways, and changes, and difficulties and pains, and creating those elixirs through those difficulties. Which brings me to that last of the four different aspects of our relationship with Svend Almighty, once again, is our individuality. That you have the particular transformed face of God through which you give these gifts to the universe. And only the ones, they're only able to come through you, some of these. And they won't be contributed to the universe except for through you. So it is an incredible feeling of meaningfulness and belonging that goes beyond, you know, I guess it's just helping us to have Zoom talks because we're kind of reaching out in a way that we couldn't before. We can't give those hugs anymore right now. And so we're finding other ways and other understandings to help each other in our growth and to realize who it is that's transforming.
And related to what Ravani Ra is saying, and this is true in a lot of fields, like in chemistry, there's some crystalline structures that were very difficult to synthesize. Nobody figured out how to do it. And then once somebody figured out how to synthesize it, somebody on the other side of the world was able to do it much more easily than they ever could before. It's like Sheldrake calls it the morphogenetic field has been to something. And so this is a real phenomena. I mean, even the kinds of things we're sharing in this class is a result of many years of distillation and experience and studying and reading. But our own experience in trying to share what we're conveying, which the content or the way of doing it changes over the years because we have more inspirations and realizations. But we've also found it becomes much easier for people that are listening to what we're trying to share to really understand what we're saying. So something's been brought about by all the people who've been working on trying to understand this, not just ourselves, but I mean, over the centuries. Pir Vilayat had this little pamphlet that one of our participants sent us a copy of Lakshmi. And he talked about how spirituality really needed to remain current with like the findings of science and psychology and so on. And not just because, well, that would make it more interesting or appealing, but he was talking about the nature of realization, and what can be understood is constantly in a state of evolution. It's not some static thing like, well, some people a long time ago got the end all of what this is all about, and our aim is just to get to what they accomplished, which is incredibly wonderful, but there's more than that. Like Ravani Ross said, there's what each of us has to contribute to that. And to me, that I guess is my most powerful motivation for wanting to share things like this, to really want people to realize that it's not just nice platitudes that everybody is a unique part of the divine wisdom, but it's the truth with a capital T. Everyone has something that without which they're expressing something's missing. It's like you're putting together this beautiful jigsaw puzzle and there's a piece missing. Well, it looks pretty nice, but there's something missing there. Or a symphony where there's an instrument missing, doesn't play their part. You may not know what all the music is about, but somehow there's this sense of incompleteness. And so we can contribute towards that fulfillment. And back to what we started with tonight, that desire leading to greater fulfillment of the divine being and our unique way of being an expression of that, not something that takes us away through thinking about all that we don't have and wanting more of this and more of that. But it's like the kind of the fundamental driving force of existence, that desire to have even more be revealed. I have something that I call the optimization of light, the inherent nature of light to seek to come to a state of greater and greater capacity of expressing itself. And that doesn't mean just turning the rheostat up and the light is brighter that we're familiar with. It's like the quality and essential nature of light can become even more than than what it has been.
So as far as practices, I think you've heard Azarbash say that the angel practice we could do all the time, hopefully during the day, that we're continually radiating this light and also thinking about it being transferred to our angel, you could say, or our all the way, like Pure Light used to say, just imagine light extending beyond and beyond and beyond what you can see in the horizon, but then also feeling it returning back to you, feeling that return light upon the light would be a good meditation. But there's something Azarbash has for you too.
So we're going to work with a practice that some of you are familiar with, and it's a wazifa, and the wazifa is QiYi, spelled QaYyum. And QiYi means like the essence. Sometimes it's translated as like the resurrection. If you think of a flower, beautiful blossom, but the flower fades, but the perfume that's extracted from the flower lasts and continues. So it's like that quintessence of something that continues even after the outer form has fallen away. So we're going to say this practice together, but as you say it, feel like you're giving voice to the underlying reality of all of existence, going through this process. Maybe a beautiful way of thinking about the alchemical process is a never-ending process of making perfume. And the whole universe is making perfumes, and everything is a unique kind of perfume. And collectively, the perfume that arises from the totality is just, I mean, beyond description. So as we say this practice, Ya, Ya means invoking the quality Ya, QiYi, feel like in your own life, you're kind of extracting the quintessence of the meaningfulness of all the experiences you've had, all the joys and sorrows that have been anticipated in the future, and feeling like this is that kernel I was talking about that continues, it's mapped into other realms of existence after we leave this physical form, but it's the uniqueness of your being symbolized by this incredible perfume that only you can make. So we're going to make perfume together as we say Ya QiYi. We'll say it 33 times together. So do it at the same time that I'm doing it. Ya QiYi. 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 And now what's called the fikr on the breath, just breathe in QiYi without the ya and feel like you're breathing in this perfume, this essential quintessence of your being. And then letting go of the word, just being with this experience. Being with the reality of your being that never dies. May the heavens be reflected on the earth, Lord, that the earth may turn into heaven. And may we all become instruments for the transfiguration of the archangel of the earth.